Hi, I'm Mark Trexler with the Climatographers. I've worked on climate change and with electric utilities for more than 2 decades. And today I want to bring you up to date on a couple of new ways that you can help keep control of what is an increasingly complicated decision-making environment when it comes to climate change and the electric sector. So it's interesting to remember that the sector has a very long history in this space. Now, the things that I've mentioned here are just projects that we worked on early on with independent power producers and electric utilities. So there are certainly more things going on, but even going back 30 years, electric utilities were starting to think about this, partially because they anticipated being regulated by the mid-1990s. Climate uncertainties, though, have continued to proliferate, even very recently. I mean, the news stories are never ending on this stuff. And there are more and more variables that, in principle, electric decision makers ought to be tracking and integrating into their thinking and their decision making. What that means is that there's a more and more need for actionable knowledge in this space. And this particular graphic, actionable knowledge can be very simple. Just when we were working with a Fortune 100 company, for example, putting this single slide up on the screen showing the changing fire risk from per 1 degree centigrade of climate change in the Western US, this single slide totally changed the nature of the conversation that we were having with senior decision makers. Suddenly, several people said, now I get it. Now I understand why we need to be thinking about climate change as a business issue, not just as a corporate social responsibility issue. Now, actionable knowledge isn't always that simple, but it can be. And actionable knowledge is the idea behind the whole climate web, which we've been working on now for a number of years. And it's an amazing resource that covers all of the topics that you as a decision maker might want to be keeping track of, not just in the electric sector, but certainly specific to the electric sector. It's been characterized by a user as like having 100 experts at the decision-making table in a whole series of fields. And so it really makes it possible to take advantage of knowledge that is out there, but that you otherwise would never be able to pull together and take advantage of for purposes of your decision-making. And that's what the climate web is all about. There are several ways that you can take advantage of the climate web. You can use it indirectly through some of the advisory services that I'll point to in just a second. But now, as of very recently, you can actually download the climate web to your own machine and use it as a knowledge solution for internal use. And I'm happy to give you more information on that. You can go to theclimateweb.com for more information, and you can go to climatographer.com for more information. You can also do a combination of those two. So for example, we have a business materiality dashboard that is populated with information from the climate web, makes it very easy to sort of stay on top of the shifting materiality conversations in this space. We have a climate assumptions audit that we do with the climate web. A lot of the assumptions that senior decision makers are operating with today are probably a bit out of date given how fast things are changing. And so the climate assumptions audit is a way to shift that and to help bring your internal decision making assumptions up to speed. Happy to discuss that with you further. Scenario planning support, something that more and more companies are getting into in a formal way. And we've designed the climate web with overlays to help you do both conventional scenario planning or the TCFD scenario planning that is getting more common today. And through these overlays, you can access literally thousands of hours of work that is relevant to your scenario planning. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump directly into the climate web to show you some of the resources there. So hold on for just a second. So now we're in the climate web. This is using the mind map view, a relatively new view for this software that has a lot of power. It's a great tool for managing a lot of information on your screen. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how the software works, how the climate web works. I'm just going to show you some of the things that you can find there. And if you're interested, you can explore further. And I'm happy to talk to you about it. So for example, on the subject of wicked problems, The Climate Web covers pretty much the whole literature on that. You can go back to the original paper by Riddle, which dates back to 1973, which was sort of the first published paper on the topic of wicked problems, and take a look at the information that we've extracted from that, and take a look at the paper itself. But as you can see here, you can actually do a lot more than that. We have index entries, we have headings, the wicked problems literature, graphics, indirect systems impacts, tons of stuff organized around the topic of wicked problems and wicked problem solving. And it is relevant to your decision making, and it might be something you want to look into a little bit further. Now, more specifically along the lines of electric sector decision making are these headings. These are just some of the headings that are relevant, and most of these have the word electric in them. Doesn't include, I don't think, all the carbon pricing headings and the public policy headings, all of the stuff that is in the Climate Web. There are literally thousands of these headings in the Climate Web. So this is just a few of them that relate directly to electric sector decision making, but it gives you an idea of some of the topics that we're tracking, and how we've organized literally tens of thousands of books, reports, news stories, websites, and more, in ways that make it easy for you to look up and stay current on specific topics that might come up within your bailiwick. Now, separate from the topics, I'm going to jump to sort of a master topics list here. If you're in the electric sector, this list comprises a lot of sort of the topics that you would love to be able, I suspect, to keep your head around as they continue to evolve. There's a lot going on in all of these topic areas, getting into potential disruptions to the electric sector, storage issues, forecasting carbon price issues, how is electric sector best practice changing for different things. So, and from here you can literally jump to any of these topics and take a look at a lot of information that might be directly relevant. One of the topics that you see here, systemic risk as disruptive, is probably a topic that you may not be thinking about very much. Systemic risk has normally been thought about in the context of the financial sector and the financial crisis, but you should be aware that there is actually a rapidly growing conversation that goes back now 3 or 4 or 5 years around climate change as a systemic risk and the implications of that for business risk management, because it's actually very difficult for individual companies to manage systemic risk. And it goes back to some of these early reports. So for example, the Lloyd's food system shock is a very interesting scenario at the implications of 3 different droughts in 3 different breadbaskets of the world. What does it mean for food prices, for economies, for political stability? And it's not a pretty picture. But it's just it was just the starting point of what is turning into a rapidly growing discussion of why climate change is potentially a very dramatic systemic risk in its own right, and sort of invalidates in some respects, or will overtake a lot of the risk management measures that people are actually talking about today. So it's a topic that it makes a lot of sense for you to be aware of. You can also get into very specific areas. Just for example, I'll change the view on this. If you get into the social cost of carbon and carbon pricing, one of the issues that you may get into then is integrated assessment models, and trying to understand how they work and how they translate into the social cost of carbon estimates and everything that comes along with that. This is just one of hundreds of topics like this, and hundreds of curated information collections that you can find in the Climate Web. So I'm going to leave it there for now. This has been just a very quick review of things that might be useful to you in keeping your head around the topic of climate change as a wicked problem for electric sector decision making. And if you take a look at theclimateweb.com and the products page there, or take a look at our advisory website, climatographer.com, you can get more information, and I'd be happy to follow up with you. Thanks.